The kitchen clock ticks louder than his heartbeat. Wyatt stares at the divorce papers, her handwriting cutting deeper than any blade. She hadn't just left him. She abandoned the future he begged her to believe in. Alone in that silence, sorrow hardened into resolve. The first ember of empire. Wyatt wasn't born into wealth or fame. He was the kind of man who carried quiet dreams in his chest, the kind no one else could see. Raised in a small town where survival mattered more than ambition, he grew up believing that hard work and love could build everything he lacked. By day, he worked long shifts, hands rough, body exhausted. By night, he scribbled sketches on crumpled paper, whispering ideas under his breath as if saying them too loud might break them. His wife would listen at first, nodding at his excitement, and he thought her belief was enough to carry him through failure. To Wyatt, she wasn't just a partner. She was his proof that dreams mattered. But what he didn't know then was this: love can be both the wind that lifts you and the storm that tears you apart. In the beginning, she was his anchor. They had nothing but each other, and somehow that was enough. When his first pitch was laughed out of a boardroom, she waited outside with a smile and a box of cheap pizza. They sat on the floor of their cramped apartment, eating slices and laughing at the world that didn't yet see him. To Wyatt, those moments felt like gold, proof that love could survive failure, but love is heavy when it carries the weight of endless disappointments. Each rejection chipped away at her faith. Nights that once ended in shared dreams turned into silence. Her smile grew thinner, her eyes distant. She began to see not the man she married, but the man who kept promising someday. What began as unwavering belief slowly cracked into quiet doubt. And though she stayed by his side, Wyatt could feel it. The woman who once believed was already slipping away. Poverty doesn't just arrive, it creeps in, one unpaid bill at a time. First it was the electricity notice on the counter, then the rent reminders shoved under the door. Soon the stack of envelopes towered higher than the fridge that barely held any food. Each one was a reminder. Wyatt's dreams couldn't keep them warm, couldn't keep them fed. The landlord's knocks grew louder, sharper, as if echoing her own frustration. She didn't have to say much anymore. Her silence at dinner was enough. When she did speak, the words cut deep. Dreams don't pay rent. Wyatt. He carried those words into bed at night, where the space between them grew colder with every passing week. The man who once filled their nights with promises now stared at ceilings in silence. She turned her back, not out of cruelty but exhaustion. Love, once their shield, was crumbling under the weight of overdue bills. And in that tiny apartment, Wyatt felt the sting of two rejections. The world laughed at his ideas, and the woman he loved no longer believed in him. Poverty wasn't just at their doorstep. It had already moved inside. Family dinners became his battlefield. The clink of forks, the laughter of cousins, and then the question, "So Wyatt, how's that business going?" All eyes turned. He tried to answer, but his wife looked down, ashamed to even meet their gaze. Her silence spoke louder than any insult. The man once introduced as brilliant, full of ideas, was now the joke whispered after dessert. Relatives smirked. Some shook their heads. She didn't defend him anymore. She let the weight of his failures rest on the table beside the empty plates. Wyatt felt the sting. He wasn't just broke. He was branded a burden, in the very place he longed for respect. Poverty had taken away his comfort, but her quiet rejection stripped him of his worth. That night, as they drove home in silence, Wyatt realized, hunger weakens the body. But losing her belief shattered his soul. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind where failure had already filled the room like smoke. Wyatt came home with another rejection, his shoulders heavy, his hands trembling as he placed the empty folder on the table. She didn't look at him with anger this time, just exhaustion. Then came the words that would split his life in two. "I can't respect a man who keeps failing." The silence after those words was louder than shouting. Wyatt felt his chest cave, as if every dream he'd ever whispered had been erased in a single breath. A week later, she was gone. No long goodbye, no second chances. Just absence. And yet in that hollow emptiness something stirred. If respect could not be given, he would earn it. If love had abandoned him, ambition would not. That night, grief carved space for fire. Wyatt sat alone in the quiet of his room, the air still heavy with her absence. The bed was empty. The walls seemed to echo her words, and yet in the middle of the pane lay a pile of crumpled sketches, the same ones she once waved away with tired eyes. He picked them up one by one, smoothing out the folds as though rescuing pieces of himself. His hands shook, but his voice steadied as he whispered into the silence. "If no one respects me, I'll build something they can't ignore." The words weren't loud, but they carried more power than any cheer he had ever received. That night he didn't sleep. Pencil scratched against paper, line after line, as if every stroke was a vow. By dawn, the outline of something greater stared back at him. Not just an idea, the first blueprint of an empire. The fire had finally sparked. The fire inside him demanded sacrifice. Wyatt sold his only car, the one thing that gave him freedom, and poured every dollar into his dream. His days blurred into nights, his nights into mornings. 18 hours at a desk, fueled not by luxury but by instant noodles and coffee gone cold. The world outside kept moving, but inside that small room, a man was quietly building something no one could see. For months, there was nothing but silence, emails unanswered, doors closed, heads shaking. But then it happened. One investor, a man with cautious eyes, saw a spark in Wyatt's pitch. He wrote a check, small but heavy with belief. That single yes lit a fire brighter than 1,000 rejections. Soon another followed, then another. The momentum was slow, fragile, but it was real. For the first time, the world gave Wyatt something his wife never had: faith. And that fragile faith was enough to keep him moving through sleepless nights, through hunger, through loneliness. He was no longer chasing approval. He was earning it, brick by brick, win by win. The day of the launch, Wyatt stood in a borrowed suit, nerves crawling through his veins. He had no guarantee, no safety net, just a product born from sleepless nights and a belief that had once been mocked into silence. He refreshed the sales page with trembling hands, unsure if anyone would care. Then the numbers started climbing. 10 orders, 50, 100. By evening, everything was gone, sold out in days. The sound of his phone buzzing with notifications felt like thunder in a life that had only known quiet rejection. Soon after, the whispers began. Headlines in small magazines, blogs calling him the unexpected visionary. Strangers began saying his name with curiosity, even admiration. For the first time, Wyatt felt a validation that no relationship had ever given him. Not fragile love, not fleeting comfort, but undeniable proof. It wasn't just about money. It was about worth. The boy once mocked at family dinners, the man left behind with divorce papers, was now the man the world leaned in to notice. And in that rush of recognition, Wyatt discovered something. Love can leave you, but respect, once earned, burns brighter and longer than any flame. Success had finally arrived. Sales soared, investors called, and beside Wyatt stood the one man he trusted most, his co-founder, his brother in battle. Together, they had fought through hunger and doubt to build a company the world was finally beginning to notice. But betrayal doesn't announce itself. Behind his back, deals were stolen, clients quietly signed away. One by one, the lifelines of his company slipped through his hands. And when the truth surfaced, it wasn't just numbers missing, it was trust. Headlines that once crowned him a visionary now mocked him as a fool. Debts mounted. His empire, barely born, collapsed in days. The sting felt familiar, like the night his wife walked away. But this cut deeper. Poverty was cruel. Rejection was painful. But betrayal from the only man he trusted left Wyatt staring at ashes, wondering if this was truly the end. Headlines mocked him, creditors circled, and the office he once called his empire now stood empty. The betrayal dragged him to the same dark place he had once known, that night in the kitchen when his wife walked away. The weight of rejection pressed on his chest, threatening to crush him all over again. But Wyatt refused to collapse twice. He had already tasted the bottom, already bled through shame and loss. This time he chose to rise. With nothing but a desk, a laptop, and his unbroken will, he began again. No investors, no partner, no love to lean on. Only pain, sharpened into fuel. Every late night was a reminder of the people who had walked away. And with every sunrise he clawed back, brick by brick, turning abandonment into the very fire that would rebuild his future. Rock bottom wasn't his grave. It was his foundation. Years passed, and the man once mocked at family dinners, once left alone in a silent kitchen, now stood beneath blinding lights. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded toward him. Wyatt, the failure, the burden, the abandoned, had become a billionaire. His net worth soared into numbers that once felt impossible, his empire stretching across industries too vast to ignore. The same magazines that once mocked him now fought for his cover story. Journalists who called him reckless now begged for his wisdom. Every headline, every interview was proof. The boy from poverty, the man stripped of respect, had built something untouchable. Wyatt stood tall, not out of arrogance, but out of survival. His empire wasn't born of luck. It was carved from rejection, betrayal, and nights of hunger. The world finally gave him what he had bled for. Not pity, not fleeting love, but lasting respect. And respect, unlike love, would never walk away. The ballroom glowed with crystal lights and polished marble, a world far removed from the cramped apartment they once shared. Wyatt, dressed in a tailored suit, moved through the crowd with the quiet authority of a man who had nothing left to prove. Cameras followed, investors lingered, and whispers of his empire floated like shadows behind him. And then, her. Across the room, her eyes found his, the wife who once said, "I can't respect a man who keeps failing." Time had etched lines on her face, but it was the look in her eyes that struck him most, regret mixed with awe. She leaned toward her friends, whispering his name, claiming him as a story she once lived. Wyatt caught the moment, but felt no bitterness. He didn't need her validation anymore. He had built something far stronger than her approval. He had built himself. Yet as their eyes lingered, she offered him the very thing she once withheld: respect. Not through words, but through silence and recognition. Wyatt smiled faintly, then turned back to the crowd. He had learned the greatest truth of all: respect earned in fire cannot be taken away. Not even by the one who once walked out. Wyatt's journey wasn't just about wealth or fame. It was about fire, the kind that ignites when the world turns its back, when love abandons you, when betrayal seems to crush every last hope. Every rejection, every harsh word, every sleepless night became fuel for a rise no one saw coming. His story proves something deeper. Sometimes rejection is the greatest respect in disguise. When people walk away, it's not the end of your story. It's the start of something far bigger than anyone could imagine. Pain doesn't close doors. It opens them to strength you never knew you had. The scars he carried weren't reminders of weakness, but badges of persistence, resilience, and relentless ambition. They shaped him into a man the world could not ignore. And now the question isn't about Wyatt. It's about you. What will you create from your own scars? How will you turn heartbreak into ambition, doubt into fuel, and loss into victory? Your fire is waiting. Let it burn. Subscribe because your rise begins today.